Good morning and welcome to Zen Fits here in Blackstone, Virginia, the center of the world. Beautiful Thursday. I think it's Thursday. The garbage came, so it must be Thursday. And I've been writing about my father in my Facebook journeys. Maybe that's what I do. I'm on a Facebook journey where I share my discovery. I share the nuggets I find in my own backyard. And I find one and I bring it up here. Oh, look what I found today. The title of this talk is The Wisdom of Cripple Creek. The Wisdom of Cripple Creek, Colorado, where my father's father, that would be my grandfather, was a silver miner, a poor Irishman. My father's family came over during the potato famine. And the Conleys, these were the simple Conleys, C-O-N-L-E-Y. They didn't add extra N's and O's and L's and all that like the other Conleys. These were the simple ones. So anyway, the Conleys migrated west, and my father's father was a silver miner in Cripple Creek, which was the picture I post with this, but this is the poorest of the poor. I mean, these were poorer than poor. These were beyond poor. This was beyond poor. And the Irish, when they came over, were the white niggers of America. Even lower than the black people. And the Jews, in other words. And my father hated them all. Anyway. So my father had a hair lip, a big cut there, and always said, I'll cut it on some glass. But he had a hair lip. So imagine a little child, and my grandfather got hurt in the silver mine, and they moved to Prescott, Arizona, which was a dirt street town, and I don't know what, they ran a little store there or something. Pancho Villa raided the town. This was rough times. Anyway, so my father's grandmother rescued him from Prescott. She had some property in Pocatello, Idaho, and he was raised there, got an operation, got a scholarship to the University of Idaho, and then a commission to Annapolis, and he became a naval officer. A naval officer. Now, a naval officer, for me, is both a literal person who serves in the Navy, American Navy, and he has rank, but he's also a mythic. You know, the naval officer is a mythical son of God, the son of the sun, and the gold of the sun drips and falls on his hat, on the brim, and on the shoulders, and off the buttons, and on the hilt of his sword. You look at these pictures of the naval officer, there's always this mythic figure. And my father told me, said when the senior naval officer on a ship goes into a foreign port, he is the direct emissary of the President of the United States. Translated mythology, the naval officer is an emissary of God, a son of God, the most beloved son. And God's gold drips off his brim and shoulders and buttons. I have some of the buttons. And I have the sword. Never mind. Never mind. Too complicated. Another story. So anyway, that's the wisdom of Cripple Creek. See if I can get back to this and clean it up a little bit. There are two moments that define my relationship with my father. Bookends. I call them Samadhis. So powerful, so deep, that they're beyond the relationship, beyond just my little personal story with my father, my little history. I call them the Samadhi of hate and love. The Samadhi of hate and love. In the 20s, my father retired in 1955, the exact same year I went to college and dropped out. Joined the Navy. Disappointed my father. I always disappointed my father, I think. Anyway, so I was going home for a vacation or a weekend or whatever, and we landed there right when Martin Luther King was marching in Florida. I got into a kitchen argument with my father, had a couple of drinks, got into an argument over civil rights, and it ended, as it mostly did with him, with his face about this far from me, snarling, "You'll never make a nigger lover out of me." And I stumbled off into the bedroom and began to cry, and this hate rose up. This green tsunami of hate that had been buried down there. Never knew it was there. I never hated anything. And here it was, washing over me. And it was green. It was green. I remember the color. Green hate. And I was pounding the pillow. Consumed by hate. A samadhi of hate. And yet, in the background, like a sunset or a sunrise, was this love. Was this love? But anyway, I never went home again with the expectation that my father would embrace me and welcome me in my differences. You know, when you want to be welcomed by your father and mother, what you want is for them to welcome your individuality, your values, or your opinion, or your viewpoint. And not try to smash it. It's kind of like a religious war. So anyway, that's one book in. So I'll go through my whole life now, my whole journey. And so my father, the last thing he said to me before he had a stroke was we were at my sister's home again in Florida. She'd married a naval officer. They got divorced, but at that time, she was married to a naval officer. When I would call my father up, and I'd say, "Pop," and he'd say, "John?" John was there. I said, "No, it's Ed." So anyway, I was clowning around before Thanksgiving dinner in the living room, and there was a cat rack with John's hats on it, and I put on one hat, and I put on that naval hat, and my father screamed at me, "Take that off, you haven't earned it." That was the last thing he ever said. No, the last thing he said to me was at dinner when I was carving the turkey, and he yelled out from behind, down at the other end of the table, "Don't you know how to cut the turkey?" That was the last thing he ever said to me. Then he stroked out. And from then on, he was okay. He didn't, physically he was fine. He just lost his memory. I mean, he could remember a little bit. He had deep memories, but he knew who everybody was and everything. He just couldn't make choices. Go to a restaurant and say, "What would you like, Pop?" "Oh, you choose. You choose." Kind of like being here. Anyway. So I brought him up to Florida. Brought in the 90s. I brought Mom and Pop up to Blackstone because so I could take care of them. They'd be near me, and had a photography studio here, and so again, 1998, big snowstorm, blizzard. Ice storm, and he started bleeding or something. And so we took him to the hospital, and the ambulance took him in the snow, ice, terrible ice storm. Closed power off for a week. And while I was in the hospital, I went over there, and I was early. Mom wasn't there, and I walked into the room. And when he saw me come in the room, he leaned out and held out his arms to me, with this look of total welcoming, this total happiness to see me, this total love. And recognizing it, I just rushed over to him, and I think he stood up then. Maybe he stood up to welcome me. And I just embraced him, and I cried with the same intensity and tears of that hate back in 1962, you see. That was the hate and the love were the bookends of my relationship with my father. And in that hug, in that embracement, he whispered in my ear, "I want to die." And actually he was dying then, in the sense that his whole old angry, snarling personality, his anger, his hate, died that moment. And we brought him home from the hospital in hospice, and I stayed over, and Mom woke me up and said, "Come help get Pop back in bed." So he was down kneeling by the side of his little single bed as if in prayer, and we got him back into bed. And he wasn't talking, and he began to breathe heavy, and he sneezed, and then just died. And we were standing there, and it was so peaceful, and I said, I think he's gone. I think he's gone. And finally, the old sailor was home from the sea. And so I share this because today, when I was writing about this, the whole thing just seemed to click. And the fact that his grandfather, his father, my grandfather, was a miner at Cripple Creek, and he was crippled in the mind. And my father was crippled by the poverty and by the hair lip and by the Irishman. And he hated Jews, blacks, and Italians, and others, I guess. I know he hated Italians. Because when I was in ninth grade, I was shy, kind of like socially retarded, and a little ninth grade girl asked me to go to the dance, and I was, somebody likes me, and I told my father, and he said, "You're not going to the dance with any wop, go tell her you can't go." And so I told the girl I couldn't go, and her sister spits on me. That's these old nuggets. These are nuggets. We all have these nuggets in our memory, but they're not just pain. They are metaphors. They are beautiful silver nuggets. A silver nugget is a piece of the moon. A silver nugget is a piece of the self-luminous light that's within. And if you can find these nuggets, and if you can look at them as if you were finding a silver nugget. Oh, look what I found buried in my backyard. Look what I found buried in the ground. If you can look at it that way, welcoming it, as my father welcomed me in the hospital, it will release the pain body. It will release the self-hatred. You see, my father hated anybody who was lower. You see, the Irish back in the day, you see, were the lowest of the low, really. And so, as he became a naval officer, he identified with the role. He became the naval officer at home, and I was the enlisted man, you see. I was the swabby. And so, I suppose, I kind of like projected that little, his own, when you have this buried, when you have this crippled, when you have a cripple in the creek, you see, just projected out there, and you hate the poverty that you have buried inside by projecting it outside. That's why I love Mad Men and Don Draper, who was always being haunted by his poverty. Haunted by one's inner poverty. Eckhart Tolle calls it the pain body. And we don't go there. We project it out and try to get rid of it out there. We project it out on the screen of the world, and we hate that. But it's a reflection. But we don't want to go and see the buried pain body inside, you see. It's projected out. So the silver nugget, the nuggets in our Cripple Creek, you see, are really buried silver nuggets of pain that we have to dig up and allow the light to go, allow the love in the hate to shine like a silver nugget of the moon. It's self-luminous, you see. Hate is dark. The nugget buried in the hate is a piece of the moon, a fragment of the moon, a fragment of the self-luminous light of love within, you see. But we got to dig them up, and they're buried in our memories. They're buried in our backyard, not in somebody else's yard, not out there in the world, but in our own backyard. Nuggets. Be a squirrel. Dig up the silver nuggets and just let them glow. Just let them expand the light of love that's buried in you, you see. So I find so much wisdom of the Cripple Creek, you know, when I investigate, as I did this morning, the bookends of my life with my father. Hate on one end, love. You know how people get hate, love? Are they separate or are they the same? Are they different? Yes, hate and love is different. But can you separate them? Are they not the same? Thanks for dropping in. The wisdom of Cripple Creek.